Unfortunately, it wasn't borderline personality disorder that was what kind of alerted people initially. It was the symptoms. From a very young age, I showed symptoms of what people thought were depression, going back to as young as 12 years old, which is quite young for determining a mental disorder because your brain's not really developed yet. And it wasn't until I was put through multiple programs, therapists, counselors, antipsychotics, antidepressants. I had a few more diagnoses thrown at me, and it wasn't until I ended up in an actual full group with other people, and it was actually a group for people with depression. And it was the nurses and the doctors that kind of at that point identified, you're different than kind of everybody else here. You're doing this and everyone else is kind of here. So it was at that point that people kind of woke up and said, oh, we've said for 5 years this girl has depression, like maybe there's something more there. So it was actually when I was kind of on my highs or being positive that the realization of, oh, it's not just this downfall of depression, she's kind of having these waves in between where they realized there was something more at play there. My relationships have definitely been affected by my BPD symptoms, definitely pre-diagnosis as well as just, where I'm at now, because I think every day I'm better than I was the last day. So even though I still have my diagnosis 5 years ago, I didn't necessarily have all those tools yet to work with it, and it negatively affects those relationships. But I think like anybody, it's all about being with the right person and having the knowledge. So now I'm in a romantic relationship with a gentleman, and it's very, very healthy. But part of that is he's very aware of borderline personality disorder. He understands that sometimes I have a bad day and I slip mentally and I'll get, we'll say, jealous. No reason whatsoever out of the blue. With a lot of people, understandably so, I'm, accusing you of something that you haven't done anything to be accused for that, but he can take a step back and understand. He separates me from the disorder and he doesn't take it personally. He says, okay, something's going on with you now, versus before a lot of the time I found people, when I didn't sit down and explain my process and why I do these things, they obviously take it personal because I'm accusing you of something. So I think part of it is being really aware and open with the people that you're close to and explaining, when I do these things, it's not, I hope you don't take it personal, I'm having a bad day or I had a slip moment. And I think that is what leads to long-term healthy relationships, is being able to, for both parties to take a step back and say okay, you did nothing to deserve me saying, I think you're cheating on me, and you can take a step back and say, well, I've done nothing so maybe there's something else at play, instead of just getting defensive. So communication and just knowledge about the disorder makes a world of difference in terms of relationships. Yeah, once I got my BPD diagnosis, it explained a lot of breakdowns in relationships or tears or burned bridges that I had in the past, and it helped me also take ownership of things that I had done. But specifically with friendships, I had, acknowledging that I had extreme fear of abandonment. And so as soon as I felt any kind of rejection, even in the smallest slight, let's go for coffee and someone's too busy. In my head back then, that was, they don't like me, they hate me, they're actually hanging out with this other girl because they like her more, and I made it so much bigger than it was. And so then my reaction to them doing something as simple as canceling a coffee date, I would end up destroying that friendship, because I would take it to the next level and react emotionally and negatively and say, oh, well, you're skipping out on me and you're not there for me. And I would put so much negativity on them that, a lot of people don't want it. It's like, I just canceled a coffee date. I don't understand why, you're reacting like I just broke up with you, kind of thing. But in my head, that's what had happened. And so I would push them away because I became so, high maintenance as a friend that I ended up doing exactly what I was scared of, in terms of I was so scared of everyone leaving me that I would push them to leave me. And looking back, I realized I did that a lot. As well as I attempted to be, and this also comes from the abandonment issues, I would be very controlling. Going back, and I know this was extremely unhealthy, and I'm so thankful that I don't do things like this anymore. But threatening, like, oh, well, if you do, I'm going to hurt myself. I'm going to do this. And that is not healthy for any relationship or either side. And that can be actually the first sign of an abusive relationship, right? If someone's threatening by controlling. So understanding that that's not the way to have relationships with people anymore. And I definitely lost people over those actions. And I don't blame them, because had I been in their shoes at that time and someone did that to me, I would have been like, no, this is not a healthy friendship. This is not a healthy relationship. So looking back and having to forgive myself, but from those experiences, learning now to have relationships. Dealing with being misunderstood back then was extremely difficult, also just because I misunderstood myself. It's very hard to understand that everyone doesn't think like you. None of us are in each other's brains. So I kind of, go back to a schooling situation. I never understood why I felt like I was on a different playing field than everybody else. I never understood why I would burst into tears over the slightest thing, and other people's misunderstanding of me would also, they don't understand, right? They're like, well, nothing happened. Why are you crying? You're acting crazy, kind of thing. And they, again, they walk away, and that breaks down relationships because you're reacting in this manner that you don't understand what's happening, and no one else understands what's happening to you. And when other people can't understand what you're going through, you put a lot of blame on yourself as well, because other people kind of said, well, why can't you just, pull up your bootstraps and get better? I put that blame on myself, and I said, well, yeah, I'm not, I'm obviously not normal, so this is all on me. I'm weaker than everyone else. I'm not doing something right. I must be doing something wrong. And so other people's perceptions and misperceptions of me kind of led to me going deeper into this, hole of depression, because I put so much guilt and blame on myself for the things that I was doing, and that people didn't understand me. I wanted to hide myself, because while I'm out in the open and I'm being social, and then I do things that people think are crazy or cuckoo, it's like, well, I'll just hide in my closet, because then I can't, people won't see things that I do and judge me for them. And then post-diagnosis being perceived, just because I now have a better understanding of, why I do things, as well as coping skills. So I kind of stop myself before I get to that point of people being like, oh, what's going on with her? But me having the knowledge, I'm also, I'm very open about my disorder, and I'll be the first one to explain to someone, well, this is kind of my process. And again, I'm not saying this is gonna happen or whatever, but if you're aware of why I do the things that I do, then we can kind of build on that. And a lot of people, once I sit down and really explain the step by step, they're quite open to it versus just seeing me react. Even at work, I've had a good sit down with my manager, and I know some people are scared to do things like that because there's that stigma around mental health. So it's like, well, you don't want to tell your manager, you don't want to tell, but I feel like I'm comfortable with him, and I think he's a great guy, so I felt comfortable enough to explain. And now it's like, I can look at him and be like, I'm having a moment, I need to go into the back and breathe, otherwise it's going to be, and he says, yep, go breathe. And I can kind of then calm myself before it escalates. So everyone understanding it makes a world of difference. And it's about explaining it to people when you're calm versus explaining it to people when you're in a moment. Because if I'm already, borderlining or spinning out of control, then I'm emotional and I'm crying and I'm like, borderline, and people aren't going to be receptive to that, versus like if you're in a calm moment and I'm a rational person and I can sit down and say, okay, this is what's going on with me, people really take it a lot differently. And so I try to tell them when I'm not in a moment, so that it is taken seriously and not just like, oh, she's having a day, she's on her period, or like, you know, whatever kind of thing. You need to really have a good conversation. I would say the misconception about BTD that bothers me the most is probably like, if you go on your computer right now and Google dealing with a borderline person, I found during my searches, and this is why a lot of people are scared to admit that they have it, the first thing that all these articles pop up is impossible to have relationships with. Impossible, you know, like, damn it, they get clingy and this and that, and I'm like, man, if I ever want to have a boyfriend and I tell him that I have borderline personality disorder, which again, to have a healthy relationship, you have to discuss your disorder with them. It's like, oh, he's going to break up with me just because he's going to Google it and be like, this is impossible. How can I? It makes people want to give up on you before they've even started. And that's, you know, the unfortunate part. And it's like, yeah, a lot of those, again, things are true, but that's someone who hasn't learned about their disorder, hasn't learned coping skills, hasn't gone through programming. And I think you could say that about, you know, anyone who hasn't dealt with any illness. Like, no, they're not going to manage it because they're not managing it properly. But someone with borderline personality disorder who manages their disorder absolutely 100% can have a healthy, fulfilled relationship. But there's really this concept out there that it's impossible. So don't even try, because they're not even worth the effort. And that's the one that makes me mad, because it scares people from you. It really does, yeah. The most successful thing about my recovery, and it's kind of, I would say, the root to the other successes, is I'm happy. I'm happy every day, which 10 years ago, I thought it was perfectly normal that I was crying in a corner. I cried every day, and I thought that was normal. I woke up upset every day. And the fact that now today I can wake up and say, I'm just happy. I'm happy to be alive. I'm happy to go to work. I'm happy to meet people, talk to people. So through that, because I'm just happier in life, obviously that, you know, trickles down to all of the other successes, why I can be successful in relationships, why I can be successful at work. But it's the root, just I am happier with myself. I think that's the biggest thing, is just my general mood. I'm excited about life and the future, and it doesn't feel like a battle anymore. I wake up and I'm excited to go, you know, learn how to play violin or do this or do that, whereas before I would wake up and it was just like, not another day. I can't do it another day. So it's waking up and actually being excited to be alive. I think that's the biggest success ever. A bad day for me back then, unfortunately, was all too common. For me, a bad day was almost every day back then, and it was like waking up with a weight on my brain. I would wake up and the first thought that I would have would be, I just want to be asleep again. I don't want to wake up. But you know, had to go to school, had to be a person, so I dragged myself out of bed. I normally would wear my pajamas to school because I just didn't care, didn't put in the effort. Hair back in a bun, ponytail, no makeup. I just had absolutely no cause to be proud of myself, and that very much reflected in, you know, I barely showered. I just did not care enough because I didn't think other people cared enough. I dragged myself to school. I'd sit through class. Most of the time I just wouldn't pay attention because I'd get so deep into my own thoughts and my own stuff, and I never thought that I'd be successful in school anyways, so why try? And I'd drag myself home and I'd sleep. And I'd try to fall asleep for as long as possible. And if I woke up, I'd try to fall back asleep because I just wanted to be asleep all the time. And generally, if I was at home and I wasn't sleeping, I was locked in my room crying. Most of the time, I didn't know what even about. It became routine. I'd just go home and I'd cry. and then I'd normally stay up way too late drinking Coca-Cola and zoning out to whatever TV was on that I could try and turn my brain off of. I'd pass out around 3 a.m. and then I'd do it all over again. So it was really just a lack of, I just didn't care. I just couldn't have the effort or means to really care, have any kind of pride in myself, and crying was just part of my day. And it took a long time, and it's funny because you think that someone would realize that's not normal, and I never did. I just thought that, well, yeah, I just cry every day. That's just part of my life. So it was almost like I had just accepted that that was my fate. Socially, when I was a lot younger, I lived in a place where I was a vast minority via religion. So how I was kind of introduced into school was, that was the first question, grade 1, I was asked, and that I was a different religion than everybody else. So it wasn't until grade 8 when we moved back to Canada. For me, it was very normal to be different. And I remember when we moved back to Canada, first recess, I sat down and read my book behind something because I'd always run off by myself and just kind of sit in my corner, and I remember 2 girls came up and asked me to play tag, and I'll never forget the moment. I pointed to myself and I said, well, no, you don't want to play with me, because it had just been so ingrained in my head all through elementary school that, no, you're just different. Kids don't invite you over. People don't want to play with you. So I think it started with that. And because I didn't have a social foundation of this is how you have friends and this is kind of how you do this, I spiraled downwards kind of from that moment. I wasn't given the tools to know how to have relationships or friends, and then being thrown into a teenage situation where you're just kind of expected to already know those things and how to hang out and how to be with people. And I think that's where I really realized that I was disconnected from everyone else. And so it was kind of the beginning of high school that I started to really spiral down. And that also coincided with my parents' breakdown of their marriage and separation of families. So it all kind of came to pass around that age of 12 or 13, which in itself is not an easy time to go through. So I think it was a slow build, but it was kind of all those big events happening at such a crucial time at once for me that then I really started to crash. And that's when I really became self-destructive. Was, I would say, grade 9 was when I became very, very self-destructive. I started harming myself physically. It all started with me bashing my head into a wall. I would get so mad and frustrated, and I didn't understand why I was crying, so I would literally just hit myself. And so that escalated into, I realized that was the thing that could stop me from emotionally crying, which was very backwards. But it was like, well, I gotta go up and show face to dinner, and I can't stop the tears. So if I punch myself in the face, the tears will stop. And so that developed into cutting, and as well as I started heavily using alcohol. I just wanted my brain off. I just wanted to stop thinking. So I self-harmed pretty much every day for about 4 or 5 years, as well as I abused alcohol heavily. And that, again, was just, I just didn't want to think anymore. So I would just drink. Yeah, quite a few people are very surprised when I tell them that I have borderline personality disorder. First and foremost is because a lot of people don't know what it is. And they hear personality disorder and they're like, but you seem so nice and you have a job and you function like a person. How, your personality seems fine. How do you have a personality disorder? So part of it's education about letting people know exactly what borderline personality is, because it sounds like a really scary thing, and they kind of expect to see someone with that on an episode of Criminal Minds or something, not, your happy little barista serving you coffee. As well as there's that, the secondary reaction I get is, but you're so happy. How do you have borderline? You're just so happy. See, yeah, you don't see me 100% of the time, and I am happy. I'm not faking it, but I have my moments where I lose it. And I don't want to say I allow myself to lose it, but I understand that, no one's going to be happy all the time, regardless of mental illness. And I just say, well, yeah, there's a lot of borderline people who are happy and lead full lives. And I've been through programming and I've gone through things and I understand my brain. And had you met me 10 years ago, you would have been like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So it's, people are surprised, but that's just because I've learned how to cope. And I know life skills now that I didn't before. So it's all there, and I know it's all still there. But again, instead of letting myself spin out of control and go buy that bottle of tequila and just, turn my brain off, I can stop and say like, okay, like mindfulness, like let's stop, let's have a moment, let's meditate on this. And because of that, it's not this big scary thing that people think that it is, but it is because I've gotten help and I've gone through programs to learn how to deal with it. So. I'm a lot of things, just like everybody. I am an artist, I'm a barista, I'm a student, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister. There are so many things that I am beyond the label, and I feel like I've done so many things in my life that a lot of people would say, well, if you have a mental illness, you can't be that, or you can't do that. And I don't associate, what I do with the arts and social media and networking can be scary sometimes because I get anxiety, through the borderline about social situations, but I don't let that control me. So I let the artist in me come out regardless of anything else. Yeah. I actually had quite a long journey and difficult journey finding the right counselor, therapist, and finding the right treatment. I think part of my issue is I was introduced into different therapies when I was young. I was about 13, so it was never under my control. It was teachers or parents or whoever saying, well, you got to go here and you got to do this and there's something wrong with you, so you should go talk to this person. So I went through a series, pretty much every scale of psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor, child, youth. I've talked to them, as well as depending on what counselor I was talking to, I got different diagnosis. I was diagnosed with PTSD, bipolar disorder, clinical depression, all of which in turn turned out that, those were misdiagnoses. And through that, I was put on different antipsychotics and antidepressants before the age of 18. Which in retrospect, they're still unsure on exactly what that actually did to my brain, being put on those types of things at such a young age. So for me, it wasn't actually until I became a adult in the system that I woke up and I got myself help. Instead of being sent somewhere or saying, go do this, I woke up one day and I said, this isn't right. I'm gonna go help myself now. And I ended up actually taking myself off of all of the medications. And then through that, I actually came through for the first time instead of kind of being doped down or already having this pre-existing label. So it was when I was put in a group therapy session of clinical depressives that the leader of the group kind of at one point was like, you're not like the others. You're like, I don't want to say you don't belong here because I think you need some help, but like you're kind of doing this instead of this. So it wasn't until I was physically put in a room and directly compared to other mental disorders that they could kind of pick out and say, yeah, you follow some of these symptoms, but you're off the map in all of these areas. And so it was, kind of when I became an adult and I took charge of my own therapy, that was the difference for me. I use mindfulness skills to address my symptoms of borderline personality disorder when I start to, I call it slip and slide is kind of what I refer to it as. And I don't expect myself to be, again, like I said before, happy and perfect all the time. But when I feel that start to slip, I can catch myself, and I'm very mindful of, I can stop and I ground myself again in reality, and I say, okay, this is going negatively for me in my head, but what's really happening. And I'll ground myself in physical things, and I start to kind of look around the room, and I have massive bookshelves, and I'll just start reading the titles of the books in my room, and then I kind of go around my room, and I always have lots of visuals around me, so then no matter what's happening, I ground myself back in reality by saying, like, okay, like, you're losing your train of thought, let's make sure we know where our physical surroundings are. And I kind of lose myself in going through the titles, and then I realize, okay, we're back in my room, I'm back to reality, I'm back to normal, and now I can complete that homework task that I was about to totally, not be okay with, and it was going to be a day emotional event, but I was able to step back and ground myself back in reality just by listing off the physical things in front of me, and then that task doesn't seem so daunting anymore. It can be easy to tap into mindfulness when you make sure it's kind of part of your routine. I always keep a coloring book on me, and coloring's become kind of this new thing, and I know that, and it's funny how many people bought me coloring books for Christmas this year, but it is helpful, and I find you need to find that thing like dishes, or folding laundry, or taking a walk, even petting the cat, like taking and brushing the cat, just that motion and movement of those small tasks. And going back to dishes, before dishes actually stressed me out. There'd be a pile of dishes, and now it's like, okay, like one dish, two dish, and I think about like Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid, like wax on, wax off, but it really does kind of get you there. And once you start using those simple tasks that again used to be the subject of stressors for me, and you turn them into kind of your meditation, it's amazing how much smoother your day can go, because instead of me stressing out about, I have to do the dishes, it's like, okay, I'm gonna zone out and do some dishes now, and it almost becomes an enjoyable task. So you lower your stress and your anxiety a lot if you can really be mindful in those just day-to-day tasks. It makes them enjoyable. If you had come to me and asked 10 years ago, do you think you can lead a happy life? I would have probably laughed and said, impossible. There's no way. There's no hope for someone like me. I've tried everything. And I really thought that I had tried everything. And I felt defeated. I felt like another day wasn't worth it. And I don't know what it was in my brain, and thank goodness I woke up one day and I realized this was no way to live. This wasn't the way to have a life, and I couldn't continue living like that. And it was in that moment that I changed my life. And thankfully there were the right people there. Finally, when I went and I asked to get help, I actually demanded help. I remember that day in the hospital, they almost sent me home, and I looked at a nurse and said, you send me home today, I'm never coming back. And they gave me a bed, and I have been literally a different person since that step was made. And looking back on myself 11 years ago, I am amazed at how far I've come. And I think that if I can do it, and if I was in such a stuck spot, and I can be here today and healthy and happy, then you can too. If I can do it, then anybody can do it. And you just need to wake up and want help and ask for that help. Don't ask for that help, demand help. Make sure someone listens. Make sure someone hears what you're saying, because you have to be your own advocate. And as hard as that is, when you don't want to be your own advocate, it could change your life.